Hey folks, it's Ben. Today we're doing a front brake job on a 2008 Chevy Uplander. We just did a video on the bearing change, so that's why this wheel looks really nice and clean. The procedure is going to be essentially the same for both sides, but because I just got the vehicle in and I haven't had this side apart yet, I've got it soaking with penetrating oil. But really, this is a job that requires 3 bolts to be removed, so it's pretty quick. Not expecting too much excitement in the video here. We'll be doing pads and rotors on the front. The rear brakes are fine. And it comes with various clips to hold these in. Our brake pads and then our rotors. It's pretty straightforward. Switch over. We've got to remove our one special little screw here on the rotor. And then of course we have our two, see if I can feel it around, yeah, right here. I think they're 15 millimeter, but I'll tell you in the video. Bolts to pull the caliper off, and then we take the old pads off, put the new pads on, open them up a little bit, and change the rotor out, and then we put it all back together again. Give it a quick test drive, make sure it's okay, but pretty easy stuff. This is a Torx, they call it a T30, is what takes this little screw out here. I'm doing this side because I've anti-seized everything prior, so I know everything's going to come out. The other side, of course, is going to be more of a fight, but once again, doable. Don't lose this screw. Set it somewhere safe. You'll need it for the new one. Now I turn the steering wheel a bit to get a little better access on these guys. There's one broken. Broken free, I mean. That's it. Next I'm going to hang this up by the strut here, and we'll change out pads and push them back and put the new rotor in. Okay, so the old rotor just comes right off because it's well lubricated. Don't really have to re-lubricate much more of the new stuff either because it'll catch whatever residual is. But that's it. Rotors are not hard to change. The customer and or whatever, my mother-in-law was complaining about some brake pulsing, which would indicate that the rotors are either warped or need to be turned. For the price, it's honestly just about as cheap to just replace them. So that's exactly what I chose to do. Let's see, let's make sure that that is my hole. So we'll screw the rotor, and that's the rotor part done. Next up will be, we'll take the brake pads off the existing caliper. Okay, so we have our caliper hanging here, and so the outer brake pad is probably going to wiggle off. And it's not too bad. A little scoring for me taking it off, but it's not near the squealer yet. But the inside pad, which is where the caliper squishes it, the little piston is a little worse for wear. It's getting down there, and there's not a lot of material left. So good to change these out now. So let's go grab a new package and slop them in. Okay, so now that you have the old pads out and I've got it laying here, there is another part you can do if you wish, and I'm going to leave this up to you. I'm not going to change them because they're in very good condition, but the kit comes with these metal things, and they are used, they essentially replace the, this one fits on top, the other one fits on bottom, and this is where, and this folds over, and this holds the pad essentially, the little ear fits here. If yours are in bad shape, thanks to New England rust or what have you, change them. But if not, then you can leave them. They're not really an overly wear item, and if they're in good shape, then keep them. Since we have the caliper assembly here, you'll notice if you do squeeze it, there's this part, and then there's this part, and this is where the hydraulics are. And this should be able to move freely back and forth on these bolts. They're greased and have boots, and that's hopefully to provide, squishing resistance when this caliper comes out. Now the issue we're at right now is that this has slowly worked its way out over time, the cylinder here, because as the pads wear and the rotor wears, it gets closer and closer together. So now we need to press that back. So what I'm going to do is, because there are tools for this specifically, I don't have one, but what I do have is the old pad back in its old home. And what I'm going to do is take a press and we're just going to push it back into the cylinder. Now this is so we get that lined up like that, lined up like that. Now obviously this outer part's going to move, so we don't want to move it. What we can do is take my essentially a large C-clamp here, back it in, the back of the cylinder's open, and since we're using our old pad, we don't really care if we scratch it anymore. So we'll just work this in. If you don't have the old pad or it's too broken or rusted, a piece of wood would work fine. And I'm just going to press this slowly back into the cylinder. I've released the cap on the brake cylinder up, the brake fluid reservoir up there, because it is pushing this fluid back into the brake system. So just take your time. And this will give us the space we need for our new pads and new rotor. You also want to clean that up, make sure you're not putting any dirt back into the little boot assembly that's here. It will only go so far before you're flat against it. You should be able to release it and it should stay there. So you got that. Let's get this out of here. Wiggle our old pad back. Now we're good to put everything back in. Our new stuff. I've had cars where I've had to come in and machine the ends of the pad so that they would fit in these holes. But this car, being a nice salt-free car, it's not too hard to work on. Work that pad all the way back. That's why the break-in period will be important, because that's where this cylinder finds its happy home again against the pads and against the rotor. The only catch is they like to go in square, so they you can't just put one in and then the other. They typically like to go in as each end at the same time. There. So now we got lots of space. And all this down. That space is still a little tight, but very doable. I'm not sure if I'm on frame. Nope. There we go. And we're all lined up for our bolts. There's one. So let's put the bolts back in and keep putting it back together again. Torque to spec on these, which is really tight. The thread lubricant helps us get them off later. So you can put them really, really tight and they'll come off later thanks to the anti-seize. That little guy's on, that little guy's on. It turns so it's not frozen. That's handy to have. It's going to drag a little bit. It's going to smoke a little bit. Break-in periods, 500 kilometers, 100 miles. Don't do any hard braking. You don't want to create any excess heat in the system right out of the gate. You want to let it kind of wear in a little bit. But that's essentially, fundamentally, how you change the brake pads and rotor on a 2008 Chevy Uplander. Not having to worry about remaster it. Whole total cost about $150 a wheel between pads and rotor. And a little bit of your time. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout out in the channel, personal or on the video. But thanks for watching. We're going to throw the wheel back on, all that stuff. You guys know how to do that.